Okay, TikTok. So since you guys love the simple offensive philosophy, we're now going to go over a simple defensive philosophy. That philosophy is bend, don't break. Okay, and that's comprised of 5 other parts. I've got all my notes right here. So if you see, it looks like I'm reading. I got my monitor right here. Bend, don't break, right? Number 1, rarely ever run man coverage, but mix it in. Number 2, your base coverage should be cover 3 or cover 4, and make sure you understand the difference between zone and match. Number 3, understand personnel, okay, and formations. Number 4, adjustments. And number 5, use your defense. Now, I'm going to try to get through all of this like as best as I can. I know everybody hates part 2s, but I've got a lot of notes here, so I don't want to force it and rush through and, people not understand. If you have questions or, if you want to challenge something I say, as long as you're not toxic or disrespectful, leave a comment, like the video, bookmark it for later because this is going to be a long one, right? And then make sure you hit the follow button so you get part 2, okay? So I just want to start out by saying, obviously, I'm not a defensive genius or a football genius. I played a little bit in high school, almost walked onto the college football team at the University of Florida. Didn't happen because I played basketball instead, but I will say that it's obvious that defense is way harder in this game than offense, right? On offense, you have much more control simply because you hold possession of the ball, right? Using the principles from that post and from the comments should be enough to help any skill level player at the very least be more competitive in most games, right? So with that being said, if defense is much harder than offense in this game, I mean, that seems relatively realistic to college football, right? It tends to be higher scoring with more potent offenses. However, the best defenses are going to use the appropriate personnel relative to the offensive personnel on the field as well as the particular scenario, right? So like I said in the simple offensive philosophy TikTok, if you scroll up, you should be able to find it, or scroll down on my page. Defense should be dictating what the offense focuses on, okay? The best defensive coaches will disguise their defenses while putting their respective players in the best position to make a play. They utilize substitutions, they take away the strengths of the opposing offense and force them to play to their weaknesses, okay? Now I'm going to try to keep this TikTok as simple as I possibly can, like how I did with my offensive strategy. There's countless adjustments you can make to the D-line, the linebackers, the secondary. And I'll briefly discuss how to use them, but I suggest watching tutorials on YouTube or TikTok and practicing them, okay? Practice. I'm still expanding my knowledge on these defensive strategies, and I imagine there's others with much more knowledge and more substantial input. So like I said, leave a comment if you have something to add or something to challenge, respectfully, because some of the comments have been insane, I'm not going to lie. Some people have lost their mind, like they're not hiding behind a screen. Anyway, feel free to add or expand in the comments, but just be respectful, please. So bend, don't break, right? Think of it this way. You can allow 400 plus yards in the game, but force a couple of field goals, get a couple of turnovers. You can still win the game, right? Particularly in head-to-head user games where turnovers and turnovers on down are way more frequent than these CPU games. If the offense is going to score, make them work for it and limit big plays. Now, if you're wondering, like, how do I implement a simple defensive philosophy like bend, don't break? If you're like me and you're building rebuilding a low prestige team in your online dynasty or offline, your defense is not that highly rated and you'll probably benefit from this kind of strategy, right? If your defense is highly rated, you're going to be able to be more aggressive based on your strength, so to speak. But I do believe you could still implement some of these strategies just with a little more freedom, okay? So number 1, rarely ever run man coverage, but mix it in. I'll say that again. Rarely ever run man coverage, but mix it in. You may have noticed man coverage is not good in this game, right? And while it probably should be better, right, in terms of matching up with real life, it is somewhat accurate in that most teams are going to base out of a zone coverage, okay? Unless they have multiple elite corners and safeties, and even then, they're probably going to rely heavily on zone coverage, okay? So if number 1 was rarely ever running man coverage but mixing it in, number 2 is basing your defense out of a cover 3 or a cover 4, and I say understand the difference between zone and match, okay? Cover 3 and cover 4 play well into the bend, don't break philosophy because of the 3 or 4 high DBs. That guy in your league who abuses the deep ball to a speed, deep threat, 99 acceleration receiver, he's going to have to use other options, right? Which he's probably not comfortable with. Now, this doesn't guarantee that you won't give up the deep ball, but it severely decreases the likelihood of getting beat over the top. Now, of course, this opens up weaknesses underneath, so it's important to mix in different variations, such as cover 3 cloud, cover 3 hard flat, etc. There are numerous variations of cover 3 and 4 which will shift where your linebackers and secondary zone responsibility are, right? Match is roughly defined as zone coverage that turns into man based on the routes, right? This is something I'm still learning about regarding responsibilities. So currently I tend to stick with straight zone coverage and mix in match coverage from time to time. You're probably still going to need to utilize cover 2, mainly if you're getting beat in the weak spots of cover 3, cover 4. I like throwing in Tampa 2, cover 2 invert, cover 2 hard flat, and occasionally cover 6. But consider those supplementary calls to your base coverage, okay? The key is to base out of certain principles, but never let the offense know exactly what you're going to be doing. Play around with it, mix it up. Okay, so number 3 is understanding personnel, your personnel, right? The people, the players on your team, right? There's multiple aspects to this, but firstly, your base defense, in my opinion, should be structured around the strengths of your team. Now, I run a base 4-3. I'm pretty deep on defense, but my strengths are at linebacker and DN, right? Do you have one decent D tackle, but you're stacked at linebacker and DB? Maybe 3-3-5 or 3-4 is a better bet for you. You'll see like other YouTubers and TikToks out there claiming that one scheme is the meta over the others, but it literally just depends on your strengths and your weaknesses. Do not sit there and complain that your 4-3 is getting shredded when your defensive tackle 2 is a 60 overall. Get him out of the game, okay? So with that being said, throw away the coach suggestions, okay? That's just lazy. You need to pick your own plays, or at least filter through looking for the correct formation and play call, right? Base everything depending on the offensive personnel. So in my case, the base 4-3 is going to use my starters in the depth chart, right? So my elite run stopper at linebacker is going to be in the game, as well as my run stopping D end. Obviously, this is better against the run. For pass defense, I utilize nickel, which substitutes out that run stopper for a 5th DB, right? I also throw in a little bit of dime on occasion, which substitutes in another DB for the linebacker, usually only if it's a blatantly obvious deep pass scenario or late in the half, right? If the offense is 5 wide, there's no reason to be in the base 4-3 with my run stoppers in the game. Anytime there's 3+ receivers, I'm in nickel or dime, okay? 2 running back, 2 tight end, 1 wide receiver, aka 22 personnel, I'm in my base. It's likely going to be a run, right? Let the offense pick their play first, then pick the appropriate formation and play call. So if you're like me and you spend a lot of time in your roster, your depth chart, you'll notice towards the bottom of the depth chart, there's different positions like sub LB, RDT, RRE, RLE, right? And you may not know what those are. I'm going to try to break it down for you really quick, probably to end the video since we're about 9 minutes in, and then I'll make the part 2. Sub LB is going to be the linebackers that are in the game during the nickel and dime scenarios, okay? I believe in nickel it'll be the top 2 and dime will be top 1. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, right? This is where the better pass coverage linebackers should be. Although, if you're stacked at safety and weak at linebacker, you can potentially sub them in there, right? Now, slot CB operates the same as slot wide receiver. Put the highest rated player there, okay? RDT, RRE, and RLE are the rush players in the nickel and dime, okay? I believe some substitutions for different schemes are more complex, so be sure to play around with it to get an idea how to structure. Sorry about that, my phone died. I was saying I believe some substitutions for different schemes are more complex, so be sure to play around with it to get an idea how to structure your scheme. I prefer to have my best speed rush defensive ends in these slots with 1 run stopper defensive tackle and 1 speed rusher defensive tackle. So unfortunately, we're closing in on the end of this TikTok. I'm going to make a part 2 involving adjustments and user defense. So make sure you follow, like, and bookmark, and I'll see you over in part 2, all right?